Hey, everybody. In the Tiger Peak Performance Group, we've got Dr. Matthew McNamee of the Tiger Medical Institute here with us today, as we do every week on Wednesday. And hi, Dr. Matt. How are you doing today?
Hey, Steve, I'm doing well. Thanks. You?
Good, good. So what we're going to talk about today is something that I struggled with for 2 decades, and that's the subject of sleep. A lot of people that we work with, Dr. Matt included in his younger years, embraced this idea that if I needed to get more done, I could rob or I could steal from my sleep time. And both Dr. Matt and I learned personally that that's a really bad choice to make. And so we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about why. And so, Matt, I guess the first thing I want to say is, what would you say to our audience that's listening right now about the long-term consequences if they continue to make that choice and do not get good quality sleep night in, night out?
Sure. I mean, there are a lot of long-term consequences. I mean, what things that they may notice on a daily basis, leading even up to that, even just, short-term sleep deprivation, you can have problems with memory because your brain takes in information that you get from the day and stores it as memory, but that can be blunted essentially if there are problems with sleep or inadequate sleep, quality sleep. You can have problems with functioning, brain functions like, planning, organizational skills and judgment. Those are some basics, but, I guess looking even at brain health on a longer scale, your brain has a function where it essentially cleans out the waste at night, and we accumulate this stuff called beta amyloid, which is ends up being a toxin to the brain, and that accumulation over time has been associated. It's one of the things. There are multiple things, but associated with Alzheimer's disease and dementia. So I mean that can lead up to cognitive problems down the road.
So when we make that choice consistently to not get a good night's sleep because we're working too long, that flushing of the beta amyloids and other toxins are not happening regularly, and so it builds up.
Sure, it's like taking your garbage out on a weekly basis, but no one's coming to pick it up.
Yep, got it.
Yeah,
that makes sense. What
so
about
it accumulates
things
over time? So
what about things like weight gain? I've heard that people can gain weight and that can be associated with poor sleep.
Sure. I mean, there's multiple factors with weight gain. I mean, there's a lot of hormone imbalances that occur as a byproduct of sleep deprivation. One is insulin. Our insulin levels typically start to go up, which is will drive things like insulin resistance, prediabetes, diabetes, and such. So an insulin is a storage hormone. Couple that with cortisol. It's one of our main stress hormones that typically will go up as well. And both those hormones typically like to store store the food that we take in and such as fat, and specifically around the abdomen. And then there's some other hormones, leptin and ghrelin, and those become dysregulated. And those are part of the hormones that are involved with appetite regulation and satiation. So, when you're hungry and how full are you? So we tend to eat more and eat more, and the signals to the brain are signaled to essentially tell us that we're full. And then typically, when we have inadequate sleep, we're kind of programmed because of the stress levels and such, and some of those hormone imbalances to crave, carbs and fatty and salty foods as well.
Yeah. Yep. All which paints a really bad picture if it's repeated over weeks, years, months, and years. So next question I have for you is, so let's say someone is, moving every day. They're eating pretty clean for the most part. They're managing their stress decently. They're hydrating well. They might even be doing a meditation mindfulness practice. basically they're doing almost everything right, but their sleep is still not good. Maybe they got apnea or something. They don't know it, but their sleep is not good. Everything else is good, but their sleep isn't good. Is someone in that situation able to optimize their health, or are they still compromised? Would you still be concerned as a clinician?
Well, I'd still, big time be concerned just because, we know, the impacts in the cardiovascular system are pretty huge.
Mhm.
We know that, under, 6 hours of sleep can, increase your risk of like a fatal heart attack or stroke by like 200-fold.
Wow.
So independent of everything else, looking at sleep, or even if I got guys that I'm working with that are getting 4 to 5 hours of sleep, we know that the impacts on, some of their hormones, like even testosterone and such, can be the equivalent of them being about 10 years older. So
Yeah.
can impact their reproductive, reproduction and reproductive organs and just overall sense of well-being and energy and such. But I think from a overall health, standpoint, if we don't address that, we can't, get ahead of the game of things like, cardiovascular disease, Alzheimer's disease, diabetes, et cetera.
I know from my own experience in the 15, 16, 17 time period, I was doing a lot of things right, but my sleep was horrible. And no matter how much I worked out, no matter how much I tried to clean up my diet, I was doing a ton of breath work and meditation. I still was exhausted and felt horrible. And it wasn't until I cleaned up my sleep that the impact of all that other activity started to take root. And so that's my final question is that when someone does figure out the sleep component, and one of the things you and I are not talking about today, we don't have the time, is what does it mean to actually have a good night's sleep? We can do that another time. If they get that right and they're doing everything else right, how does sleep accelerate or act as an accelerant to all of that other good work they're doing, or does it?
I think it may feel like an accelerant because when you're not sleeping right, everything else feels kind of bogged down. But, the impact just on the brain itself is you have, better, planning and organization, you're more goal oriented, and your judgment is better, and you have more responsible decision making.
Yeah.
So when you have that coupled with, better energy after restful sleep and more motivation, I mean, these are the norms you're supposed to have. So it might feel like an accelerant, but this is how you're supposed to feel.
Yeah.
In an optimal, environment, essentially, in an optimal, human condition, essentially. So with that, I mean, it's a lot easier, to stick to a movement practice and to get out and move when you have the energy and the motivation and such.
Right. Well, the bottom line is we know from the practice, the clinic that you have and the work that we do, we definitely can fix people's sleep if they're prepared to do that. That's the good news here is you might feel hopeless, like you've had bad sleep for many years. With the right coaching, the right data, the right potential supplementation, clinical oversight by you, a person can fix their sleep. We've seen it time and time and again. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Yep. I mean, our goal is just to figure out what the root imbalances that are basically in the way of optimizing their sleep.
Yep. Including it could be genetics. Like for me, I'm genetically predisposed to have sleep disturbances. So that just means I've got to work at it a little harder, but it can be done. And I've solved my sleep problem. And so you can too. And listen, if this describes you, don't sit on the sidelines, get some help. Please raise your hand, give a thumbs up in the comment bar, reach out to me in direct message. Let's talk. All right. The first step in the process with Tiger Medical Institute is to just have a conversation. There's no selling going on. What we want to know is, can we help you? We want to understand your situation. That's the first step. And then if you and I feel like that's a possibility, then we can talk more about how you might do that with us. So thank you and have a great day.
Thanks, Steve.